how that must mean we're going to have a really great live show today. It literally just went out right before we started streaming. And so we're streaming from the power of the cellular towers, which is good. So, hey, Monica, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you. We don't live near each other. I don't know if people know that out in on the internet. But anyway, it's so I haven't seen Melissa in a while. It's good to see you. I hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Yes, I've missed seeing you too. Um, I know your plan was to be at the Capitol today. Do you want to talk a little bit about the bills that are up today and why they're so important?
Yes. And we're, rallying the troops to be over at the Capitol. I know you mentioned that Jennifer is filling in for you because you're not able to be there. And this is what's so great as I'm listening, as people are listening, is this is a real team effort. And sometimes we can be there, sometimes we can't. But even if you're not able to be at the Capitol, making sure that you email and whether you're to support or to not support a bill, making sure you're contacting your legislators, it's all so important. So what we're going to talk about today are some of the bills that you can look at. And if you haven't seen it on Texas Ed 911, go to Facebook. Well, you're obviously watching the live feed, but you can follow some of the bills that Melissa is recommending that you follow and give feedback on or even support this week, and then some maybe that we don't want to support. So, so Melissa, which one do you want to start with? There's
Well,
several.
there's several, but in state affairs this morning, or hopefully this morning, sometime today, they're going to be hearing two bills related to pornography. And they're both authored by Senator Paxton.
Yes.
And one is SB 14. And this one is important because it requires device filters to be turned on by default when issued by a vendor. And then SB 2021, this one requires that social media platforms and internet websites with adult content, they must verify the age with a driver's license or some other proven process to prove identity. And those, it kind of makes me wonder if that's why our electricity went out this morning. Because the devil does not want those bills to pass. I mean, imagine right now the porn industry just has complete access to our children unless we are parents 100% on top of it, doing everything we can to lock down their phones and make sure they cannot access this content via our TVs and things like that, yet they can access this type of content in our school libraries, which is why this is so crazy. But these are, directly going after the porn industry and their access to our children. So Monica, why is that important?
We see a lot of harmful effects from, let me turn off my notifications. You can probably hear them. We see a lot of harmful effects when it comes to pornography. And many times people don't want to focus on that. But there are some real effects. Now, not only do we see that pornography today has become increasingly violent, and many times, really, the pornography is a form of trafficking. And so, and not just a form of trafficking, but we have many people who have come out of the porn industry who have really shared that they have to be drugged in order to even continue in that kind of to even be in pornography, or that many of them are being trafficked. And so this is not only from the behind the scenes of how we know that this is actually enslaving people and destroying people's lives, but then the effects on the people watching it, and especially children. Melissa, we have heard so many stories of boys who are now masturbating in schools, right
Mm-hmm.
in the hallway, right in the classroom. They've gotten to a point where they're no longer thinking, they're just acting. These were not necessarily cases of rebellion. I mean, I can say it's a spiritual rebellion, but
Mm-hmm.
this is just this hyper sexualized environment that they're in, watching pornography, having addictions to pornography. We've heard testimonies from lots of people around the world, really, who have testified to porn addiction. And so that's part of talking about porn addiction. It's actually in the bill as well. So you'll see that there are warnings that will be put up on porn sites, as well as a message about a helpline to get help from porn addiction. And so this is a
Wow.
real health issue that we're having. It's a public health issue that we're having, not only in our country, across the globe. And so I think this is really a great bill, not only in protecting our kids through age verification, but also in providing more resources and warnings, similar to warnings about alcohol, warnings about
Mhm.
tobacco use,
Cigarettes.
warnings
Yep.
about, right. So now there's going to be this warning about pornography to give a person, whether it's an adult, hopefully a child will not be able to get to this at all, but to see that warning, knowing that this can lead to a lot of health disparities, a lot of problems physically, mentally, spiritually. We're finding that men or women are no longer able to have healthy sex lives because they're so addicted to what they've been watching online. It's destroying marriages. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And I just think it's a real common sense bill. It's exciting because, Melissa, that we've been at this for over a decade. With porn and sex education and all this, trying to clean this up, and to see this kind of bill in this session is just really exciting. That the legislators are being courageous enough to do this. This is from Paxton.
Yeah, and some people might think, well, okay, porn is really not that bad, but all the data shows that it does destroy marriages, and it does destroy our sex lives as we get older. So I would like to talk about that a little bit more, because I think unless people understand that, it seems like, one, it seems like a lofty goal. Really, is this something we can really achieve? And two, is it really that necessary? Why do we have to restrict this kind of content? And I would say, if we were, as a society, better connected to our faith and our creator, it would be obvious to us
Mhm.
why this shouldn't be happening. And hopefully it wouldn't be happening. But I think part of the reason is because we aren't connected to what is good and holy and true as a society. And the more we interact and engage in pornography, whether it be visual or pornography intended to arouse, it it's changing how we think about our day-to-day lives. I don't want to think about this, but I think we have to. The kids that are in the halls at school and cannot control themselves and need to masturbate, and they have no inhibitions. They're not bathroom. They're not, there's, we have totally lost our ability to be modest. We have totally lost our ability to care about the other person, to have respect for the
Yeah.
other person, to have respect for society in general. And as a result, we're losing our self-control. And then you think about, as we grow up and we become married, a successful marriage is built on sacrifice. And if we cannot get our mind off of the idea of climax of some kind, and to change and change and change to that it has to be violent for it to actually happen, we're putting ourselves in a
Mhm.
situation where one of the spouses is going to be physically harmed. And if they're not physically harmed, the entire marriage is emotionally harmed and spiritually harmed, because the world has entered into the bedroom of what is supposed to be a private situation. If you're constantly engaged in pornography, that's what you're going to be thinking about when you're engaged in the wonderful sex act that God has put out, not focused on your actual spouse. And in that kind of a situation, women especially become more like blow up dolls than anything else. And I think even these days, the way that women are portrayed on TV, that their sex life is so important and it defines who they are. I think a lot of married women are struggling with that as well. They're looking for some kind of perfect romance to initiate what's happening in the bedroom. And I also read not very long ago that when you talk about not being able to have a normal sex life as they get older, I've heard that
Mhm.
these testosterone clinics that are popping up everywhere aren't just because people want to beef up, but ultimately it's because very young men in their 20s actually are not able to get an erection, and that's why they can't, part of why they can't have a normal sex life. And so we are destroying our children with this stuff. And so it is a public health hazard. It impacts every aspect of our lives. And for people who are addicted, it is very hard to turn that around. It changes your brain chemistry, and it does require help, which is why having a helpline and warnings and that kind of stuff is incredible.
Well, and Melissa, many people think that this is just an issue with mostly men, but there's, the growing population of women who are addicted to pornography is a reality today. I have a good friend, her name is Crystal, who actually started She Recovery, and you can Google that. It's called She Recovery, and it's a ministry and it has counselors, and it's specifically for women and teenage girls because her testimony is that she became addicted to pornography at the age of 11 because her older teen brothers had pornography in the house, and so she found it, she got curious, and she just couldn't stop. And a lot of times, even Crystal and many of the testimonies, they know it's wrong, they know that there's something wrong with this, but the curiosity of this is also very powerful. And then it becomes, a secret, and then you just keep seeking it out. And it's very difficult for a young person, an adult, but especially for a young person. And so there are recoveries for a lot of people, different ways for both men and women to get into recovery from porn addiction. But this bill not only is going to regulate that and protect kids, offer a warning, offer access to resources to help with your addiction, but it's really telling society and our culture that, hey, porn is dangerous.
Hmm.
Porn is dangerous for you spiritually and physically, for your relationships, for your future. And really, pornography takes us down to our very base nature. We're not animals, but pornography kind of
Hmm.
really takes our humanity away. It's incredibly dehumanizing, not only to watch and what's happening. The people who are involved in pornography are dehumanized, they're dehumanizing each other. But it's also taking the person into a very base place of their lives. You're reduced
Hmm.
to like a Pavlov's dog kind of a thing, is, do this and get gratified, push this button and get gratified.
Hmm.
And that's not who we are. That is not the value of humanity. That is not the sanctity of intimacy in a marriage. And that's the big difference. And you really hit on that when you talked about marriage, is that sexual intimacy isn't about necessarily, of course, culture has made it that it's about getting self pleasure. We hear Planned Parenthood, and we hear the sex education industry and the abortion industry all talking about pleasure, that this is all focused on pleasure. But really, the way God created sex, because God created sex for intimacy within the marriage, is that you're giving to one another. So you don't have to be
Hmm.
worried about, am I getting my own satisfaction? Because in a healthy marriage, each spouse is giving to one another. And so, so you're fulfilled that way because you're not being selfish. That's the point, is that you're not supposed to be selfish with one another. And so this is a great bill. I want people to look it up. If I think that, I don't know, Melissa, if you have this on Texas Ed 911, but to get on the Texas Legislative, the TLO is what I always call it, and look this up, SB 2021, and read it for yourself. Contact the Paxton office. Let them know that you're in support of this. Melissa, I don't have the link in front of me, but how can they support this? Because there's a hearing on this today.
There's a hearing on it today. If you were to go to Google, your internet search provider, and type in um, TLO Texas, let that come up. And well, actually, the easiest thing is I'll just post this link in the Facebook page. It's hard to
Amazing.
stay on top of everything that we could possibly post. We just don't have enough volunteers, but I'll make sure to post it in the Facebook page, and they can click on the link in the Facebook page, and it will take them to a list of people who are on the State Affairs Committee, and they can email the people on the State Affairs Committee. This is a Senate committee. They can't provide our online testimony. There is a House committee later
Oh,
today where online testimony is an option, and you can actually submit your position one way or another, which is something I'm really learning to like about the House, because it's very hard for parents to be physically at these hearings. But even if you can't physically be there for the Senate, we want to make sure that we reach out to those senators and let them know that, hey, we are in support of these bills. These are excellent bills, because in order for this to become law, it has to pass out of the committee, and it has several other steps that it has to take. And so we want to stand up for kids. We want to stand up for humanity, and we want to make sure that that Senator Paxton is supported in this effort. So so as soon as the live feed is over, I'll post that on
That's great.
Facebook.
And guys,
So
when you email Paxton's office in support of this bill, read it first. Don't just support it because Melissa and I are telling you. I believe you can trust us, but read it for yourself and make sure that this is something you want to support. You need to know what's in this bill. And in your email subject line, type in, SB 2021 dash support, or
yep.
reverse it, support dash SB 2021, so that the staff can see that quickly and they can quickly see how many emails are in support of this bill. And then just in the body of the email, you can let them know why this is important to you.
Yeah. There's another real important bill in that same committee today, which is SJR 70, which is actually a constitutional amendment, an amendment to the Texas Constitution offered by Senator Brian Hughes out of East Texas. He's actually my senator. And basically, this would put in our Constitution the fundamental inalienable rights that we receive by God, and protect those rights. The courts have stated that they are protected, but the reality is our school districts are struggling with that. A lot of our state entities are struggling with that. And who knows what the situation is in the federal government. They could literally come out tomorrow with some kind of rule and try to enforce that parents are no longer parents. And so to the extent we have that kind of protection in the Texas Constitution, it only protects us even more. And so we are in support of that bill. We are asking, if possible, that they list mental health. They have several other things listed as included, which does not necessarily mean that they're the only things included, but our school districts are really struggling to differentiate between mental health and medical care. They are considering mental health outside of medical care, which seems crazy to us average people, but we want to make sure that it's very clear that mental health is covered, because that is a huge problem we're having in our schools right now. And so there's those three really great bills in that chamber this morning. And then there's also this afternoon, youth health and safety in the House. And this has been a struggle for us with Texas Ed 911 and just, I think, parents in general, because this particular committee is focused on the safety of our children in schools. Well, the problem with that is that they have bought into the idea in general that more mental health is the answer. And we don't believe that to be the case at all. We have seen our children just become shells of themselves because they have totally lost their self-confidence. They go to school and all that is talked to them about is, do you feel safe? Are you depressed? Are you suicidal? Let's talk about sex. I mean, everything other than what they're actually supposed to be doing at school. And if they had confidence that they could do their math, confidence they could do English, if they felt connected with their school and were engaged in activities and spending time together rather than actually just focused on a computer all day long, they would actually have the self-worth that they should be building. But right now we're sticking them in these schools for a minimum of 8 hours a day, and none of that is happening. And so when kids, as they grow up, and their confidence lessens because they don't feel good at anything, we tell them they're great at everything, which is, I think, also a problem. We need to learn what we're good at and what we're not, and how to improve when we're not, where we need to be, or maybe where God created us to spend more of our time. And right now we've made math all about reading, and so we have totally destroyed anybody who was going to grow up and cure cancer, or get us on Mars, or what, all of those things are not going to happen because we've made our mathematicians think they hate math, and because we've made it all about reading. And we have kids that aren't reading on grade level, and we just keep passing them along and passing them along. And when you're sitting in junior English class and you can only read at the grade level of third or fourth grade, that is not building your self-confidence. You're going to be depressed. You're going to wonder if you're ever going to be able to provide for yourself. That type of depression is what is driving our children, not depression from COVID, not depression from just general issues in life. We don't need to be depressed when we have a sad day and think, oh my gosh, I'm depressed. I need medication. And so a lot of what's happening in the safety committee, unfortunately, is focused on mental health. And there have been some really great bills, and there is a really good bill today. And I want to make sure that the 1927 And this one requires that parents get notified if the school is planning to detain their child in a mental health facility. Doesn't that just
Mm.
seem like common sense? Why on earth would we need a law to do this? Well, unfortunately, several instances all across the state, multiple ones in San Antonio, which is where I used to live, actually kids are being taken off to mental health facilities without parental consent, without the parent being involved. And even a situation, and it was actually on the news, it wasn't, I think it was sometime last year, a little boy, he couldn't have been over 10 years old, handcuffed, being taken to a police car to go off to a mental health facility. And his dad is literally standing there wanting to
Ugh.
help, and they refuse to let him help. I mean, is just, it's unacceptable. The idea that that could even happen in our country just continues to show how parents are viewed. We are not actually viewed as the protectors of our children. If I show up, if my kid is in mental crisis and I show up, they should be releasing him into my custody, not putting him in a cop car to go to a mental health facility. That is just an absolute violation of rights. And so this would at least require that parents are contacted. And there is an enforcement mechanism in this bill as well. And so, it's a bill that we support. But there's another bill, HB 773, that we strongly oppose. And this bill appears to give school full discretion as to when or whether they release a child to a parent during the school day. Are
Wow.
you freaking kidding me? I mean, that is absolutely unacceptable. But those are the types of laws that are sitting in some of these committees. They make absolutely no sense. I have no idea why on earth that type of bill would ever get a hearing. I mean, that to me is really wrong.
So
And that
who's the author of that bill?
um
Or
sorry,
we
I've
may
looked
have
at
to
so
look it
many
up. If you
bills.
don't have it,
You'll
that's
have to
fine.
look it up. HB
Yeah.
773. Um and
Melissa,
it is
that is just what is happening and what we see in this culture and what we see in our government. This belief that children do not belong to their parents. This belief,
yeah,
Marxist belief that the family unit needs to be dismantled. This belief that other adults can be the caregivers and know what's best for our own children. We have seen this in the sex ed industry. We've seen this in the abortion industry. We're seeing it in mental
mhm,
health, where people are trying to take away children from
yeah,
their families. And
yeah,
and
that's
this is a
exactly right.
battle that we're facing. This is and we're going to see more and more of these kind of bills, and have been. I mean, on a lot of the transgender bills in the previous session, I read, parents are barrier to the healthcare of their children. They're
Mhm.
trying to make a case that parents are dangerous, uneducated, ill-equipped, and we need to make this stop. And the only way we're going to make it stop is to be vigilant, to start reading these bills, to be involved, to lead at home, lead in policy. So important, guys. Wow.
It really is. And not every while I would hope everyone could take the time to read all the bills, not everyone does have the time to do that. And it's crazy,
Mm,
like these bills that are being heard today, we heard about on Thursday and Friday. And so
wow.
the average parent, it's very hard for the average parent to stay up and know. And just the amount of time that volunteers spent this weekend trying to make sure we had, positions on all these things. If we didn't already have positions, sending information out. And so it's understandable that it can be overwhelming for
Yeah.
people. And so one thing you can do is go out to texased911.com and sign up as an ally. And it doesn't cost any money. It is literally just putting you on the email list. And if you're on that,
Mhm.
last night, before I finally went to bed, I sent out an alert for today, and it included these 4 bills or 5 bills that we're talking about. And you can literally, there's just short information that tells you about the bill if you trust what 911 stands for, and then just send the emails. We've got all the email addresses there for you. You literally just have to cut and paste. You can add your personal testimony, your personal reasons for support. But we want to make sure that we make it as easy for you to be as involved as you can be. If you don't have the time to read the bills, go to the Capitol. And that's, I think, one of the best ways that the average person that might not have the extra time or the ability at the moment. Maybe they have super little kids or, lots of life happening. You can oftentimes send an email, and then we even leave the phone numbers, because if you have time to make a phone call, one or two, even if you can't contact everybody, and let them know. Our understanding is phones ringing off the hook really matter. They don't like it when the phones are ringing off the hook. And so that tells them that there's a problem. And so in this situation, you could call and you could give some great praise reports and, throw up a huge warning sign on HB 773. So
Yeah. And guys, I love what Melissa just said, that a lot of times these offices don't like to hear the phone ringing off the hook. Um, it's a good sign when that's happening. And it's a
yep.
good sign when I think it's all about perspective. I know one year I sent out emails or a campaign for all of Texas to communicate with the State Board of Education about our health
Mm-hmm.
teams. And they were very angry and were begging whoever was doing this to please stop. But guys, if you're blowing up the phones and if you're blowing up their emails, that means the families of Texas are actually engaged and active
Exactly.
in policy making, in their lives of their children and how their children are affected in school or in the health industry. That is, so it's all about perspective. And
Yep.
so it's great, instead of these staff people thinking, oh no, I wish people would stop calling. It should be like, oh, this is amazing. Texas families are engaged and active and they
Exactly.
care. So I'm real proud of you guys for doing that. Quick question, Melissa, because I'm just so blown away by what Hughes did in Texas Constitution. Is that part of your email? Is
It
that in the
is. Yep.
email? Okay,
Hmm.
awesome. I'll look it up then.
Yeah,
I hadn't
it
heard about that
is.
one, so I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, it didn't get as much attention for today because of the porn bills that were up, but it is equally as important because of what it does, and it does have a companion in the House as well, and I believe it's moving along. So the last thing I wanted to say, kind of to just reiterate what you just said, but remind people why does it matter if the phones are ringing for decades. We, as the
Yeah,
family, have been busy raising our family and ignorantly trusted that the
yeah,
process in Austin was going to take care of protecting our children and our parental rights. And what we found is, just like within our schools, the people who make money off of our children, the bureaucrats who run our education system, they're after power, they're after control, they're after profit based off of our children. And right now, and for the last several decades, they have been screaming without even having to scream. They're constantly present. They have employees that walk the halls of the Capitol pushing their agenda. And that's what we're up against. And so if they're not hearing from us, they're just going to listen to the people who are in their office. And it saddens me to say that, because that's not why I elected my elected officials. I elected them
yeah,
to represent me. I shouldn't have to be on top of them, reminding them what I put them in office to do. But unfortunately, that we live in, and it is human nature. The person who's constantly at your door providing you information 24/7, year after year after year, they have your ear, right? We tend to be and act like the people we spend the most time with. And so if our legislators and their staff are spending most of their time with those types of entities, then we're not represented. And so even though we
mhm.
can't physically be at the Capitol, we can do email, we can do phone calls, and that is how they're going to know that our voice matters. And so,
Yeah, that's so good, Melissa. So important. There's something called the social learning theory. And so if any of you guys are familiar with the National Sex Education Standards, which are not the standards we want for our children, because it teaches them gender identity and orientation and all kinds of things. Sex, is it teaches that it's acceptable to have sex in childhood. But in there, they mention social learning theory, that they base everything that they're doing, their approach, on social learning theory. And what all that really means is you're learning by example. You're learning by experience. So the more they show our children inappropriate, sexually graphic content, they're basically saying the child learns that that's normal and they start to act that out.
mhm,
Well, it's the same thing for adults, unfortunately. So, I was told many years ago that Planned Parenthood goes to the Capitol, especially around, before session time. I'm not sure exactly the dates, but that they go on a weekly basis and they have a different handout with their branding, constantly talking about reproductive health and
Mhm.
sexual health. Now, if you're a really strong conservative and you know the word of God, then you're not going to fall for this. But if you see that every single week, you start to hear and see and think,
Mhm.
"Oh, this is public health. This is public health. This is what we need to do. People need this because 'cause they're getting disease. People need this because 'cause they're having unplanned pregnancies." And you start to believe whatever Planned Parenthood is telling you.
Yeah.
And so this is why it's important that as this movement is growing for family, that we continue this movement, because we need to also be sharing the truth of God, God's creation of family and marriage, and the protection of our children under the authority of the parents who are under the authority of God. They need to be able to see that. And not just that, the science backs us up. We know that healthy and strong
Mhm.
families are what make a strong society.
Yep.
So we have science on our side because God is the creator of all of that.
Right.
So it's not just only that we know our faith, but it's the fact that because God created humanity in this way with marriage and families and children, there is science to back up that his creation is the perfect creation and is what we need. And we want our laws to not necessarily interfere with family, but to protect the family and their rights and their God-given authority.
Yeah, and in addition to that, to elevate the components of family, to if we're going to offer help, let's offer help in keeping marriages together. Let's offer help in making sure dads are engaged with their kids. Let's offer help so that parents can improve their parenting skills and get back to actually parenting our children rather than allowing the state to do that. And so that's the type of stuff that we as a society should be focused on. And so well, we are way out of time today. Monica, thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you guys next week. But stay engaged. Make sure you sign up as an ally on texased911.com so you know what's going on and how you can contribute right now. Have a great day.